Hello, and welcome to another Book Thoughts. Today we're talking about The Heirs of Babylon by Glen Cook. And if you know me personally, you know that Glen Cook is my favorite author, and I am slowly running out of books. It makes me sad, but it does make me appreciate every one that I read now. Then I'll obviously loop back around because his books are fantastic. But Heirs of Babylon is actually one of his very early books. I think it was like his second or third published, maybe. And it's a bit shorter. It's only about 200 pages, so it's a quick read, and I really enjoyed it. Right off the bat, I really enjoyed it. So let's talk about the setting of this book. This is neither science fiction nor fantasy. This is post-apocalyptic, and but it's a a society that underwent an apocalypse and is slowly grinding itself away to nothing in the aftermath. So World War III happened 200 years before the beginning of this book. It's unclear exactly who was on which side. It wasn't necessarily the Cold War, but there were elements there that you can see that were left over from Cold War alliances, but not everything is lined up quite right. It's a big mystery there. And you also see that society is made of, aerstats, replacements, and trying to cobble together things that are still in existence. Putting pieces together. They've lost the ability to make a lot of new things, but they can still fix up enough the old things to keep them running. The main narrative of this book follows Kurt as he joins a ship for the next gathering, for the next meeting. Now, those are capitalized words, right? The gathering is when the high command of the West gathers up all of available forces from the remaining nations to go and do naval battle against their nemesis, Australia. And that is the meeting, right? The meeting of the fleets. This has been going on basically since World War III. The world has been changed, right? Russia is largely uninhabitable. The United States is largely uninhabitable. There are, big chunks of Britain that are irradiated, and bioweapons tore their way through southern Germany, and the whole world has been changed, and so the population is very small. They don't have an industrial base. They can basically do two things: they can feed themselves, and they can put together old technology to get it to run. Kurt, being part of the gathering, is called up signs up for the Navy as a quartermaster, and he is on the ship. And the ship is from World War II. It's a U.S. ship from World War II that was salvaged, and then salvaged, and then salvaged, and they give this history of the ship being captured by these people, and then these people, and these people, and so they don't have oil anymore. They can't move the oil around, so they've converted it into a steamship, which makes it very slow and ponderous, and things are breaking because it's not meant to be a steamship. And it's a lot of fun seeing how they try to keep the technology going. The ship had a radar array, right, attached to it at some point. But, now it's kind of, it doesn't really work because they don't have the parts, because they can't make the circuits, and, it's the whole thing. So we start off with very much what you would consider a military book, right? It's about men on ships, and he's dealing with conflicting emotions about leaving his wife at home, and he finds out that she's expecting a child, and she leaves for Germany, where they're from, to go to Norway, where you can theoretically live outside the control of High Command. And High Command, I should also mention, is a very fascist, entity, down to having political minders and one of these political minders is on the ship and is a threat to everyone aboard it. But it's very much a military. It starts off very much a military story. Then it changes, because as we journey along, Kurt learns things about the outside world. He talks to people. He finds out, things. People start dying when they say the wrong things. The book goes from being a post-apocalyptic naval story to being a 1984 totalitarian state, you can't trust anything story. And Kurt starts being drawn in to the more aware world. He starts learning what's really going on, or maybe not, because the sources, they're never definitive. They're never definitive, but from the perspective of the reader and from the perspective of Kurt, a lot of what's being said makes at least some level of sense, right? There's a logic there that helps fill in this world and deal with some of the little inconsistencies that were in the earlier part of the book. And then finally, after Kurt gets drawn far enough in to this 1984 world, and the conspiracies and whatnot, witness to the conspiracies, he tries to stay aloof for as long as he can, but eventually turns it into a bit of a spy thriller. Little games of cat and mouse, whose allegiance is to who, in a small capsule, right? Because they're all on a ship, and the characters are the same characters the whole way through. So you get three very different feels that all complement each other, and it gets stronger, in my opinion, as it goes on. As the start of a war book, it was interesting. It was neat. Seeing the post-apocalyptic world was cool. But once we started getting to that Orwellian business, it got a lot more intriguing. The characters suddenly were a lot more investable, right? I could delineate between them and their essences a lot better in that framework. And then the spy thriller built right off of that. And then when we get to the ending, it's hard to end a thriller. It's hard to end an Orwellian tale. But I think this just puts the period right where it needs to be. And it just ends right at the right spot. It ends well. It ends clean. I love it. I really enjoyed that. Reading this book, I will also say, if you come to this with the mind of a fantasy book where sometimes the language gets a little big, gets a little showy because it's trying to impress upon you this world around you. Science fiction can get, you get the technobabble explaining how this science fiction world works. This was very short, right? This was very clipped. We only understand as much as Kurt understands. And Kurt has a job, and he understands his job, but he doesn't even understand necessarily all the other jobs on the ship, right? He's a quartermaster, so he has some connection with the crew, some connection with the officers, but he's not really of either world, so we don't really delve into, a fuller view of what's happening in either world. He understands the NCO space quite well. That's what we see him living in. NCO being non-commissioned officer. The in-between ranks. So, because of that, and Kurt's he's a very practical post-apocalyptic German. He has his periods of philosophicalness. There's the German romantics living in his heart, the Enlightenment era, but at the same time, he's very hard-nosed, practical-minded. He just wants to understand things and do his job and survive. So the prose, I think, mirrors that really well. Short, clipped. Yeah, and it's a short book, but I think it just worked out way better than I thought it was going to when I started it. I thought I was going to enjoy my time with it, but I wasn't expecting it to twist so effectively. And obviously, I can't talk about any of the twists themselves because even the knowledge of the twists, like the general like notions of what space they live in, would rob the middle part of the book, that the Orwellian business, of a lot of its punch, because then you would kind of start to know what to distrust, and that would rob it, and I don't want to do that. This book is a little bit of a strange one. It's short, quick read, but I really recommend it. Hunt it down if you can anywhere. It was out of print for many years, but I think since 2018 it's back in print again. And full recommendation. It's got sweet art too, sweet cover. With that, I'm going to let you go. Comment if you also are Glen Cook head, or if you've read this book, or if you're just interested in this book. If you have questions, I can answer some. Or if you just want to share your opinions. Like to give so people can see this video, because we would like more people to read Glen Cook's books. People don't know about this one. And subscribe so you can see me do silly game things or talk more about books or what have you. All the different things I do on this channel. I will catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.